So we get this laundry list of give me this and this, hoping that somewhere in there is the one thing that this person will actually need when the future comes around. And we see bloated products everywhere.
Welcome to the Product Agility Podcast, the missing link between Agile and product. The purpose of this podcast is to share practical tips, strategies, and stories from world-class thought leaders and practitioners. Why, I hear you ask? Well, I want to increase your knowledge and your motivation to experiment so that together we can create ever more successful products. My name is Ben Maynard, and I'm your host. What has driven me for the last decade to bridge the gap between agility and product is a deep-rooted belief that people and products evolving together can achieve mutual excellence.
Welcome to the Product Agility Podcast. Now, there's a problem which I have felt firsthand. I know it's a problem which product people and agilists have felt alike. How does the team get stuff which they can work on, which is ready? Things they can deliver, stuff that doesn't leave them stuck in the mud, backlog items that don't leave them so confused they have no idea which way to turn. I remember when I first started as a product owner, I thought the thing to do was just to write all the backlog items for the team. Cue many confused faces and a complete rewrite of everything in the backlog. We threw it all away. We are joined by a gentleman who may have some answers for us. His name is Shane Hastie. Shane is someone that I met many years ago when he accredited my Agile coaching course for IC Agile. And it's a delight to get this opportunity to speak to him again. So, Shane, before we get into the depths of this problem with getting a backlog, getting things ready for the teams, could you tell our listeners a bit about yourself?
First of all, Ben, thank you very much for having me on the podcast. It's a pleasure to be here. So probably in the product management, product ownership, business analysis, I would say I've made every possible mistake. I've been doing this stuff now for 40 years since I had my first formal training in what was then called structured systems analysis. That was when I was an analyst programmer working in a financial institution. Over a very varied career, working in many industries, a lot of time working in small to medium-sized airlines around Africa. So I saw a lot of airports and airplanes that you wouldn't really want to go on or to. But
Did you go on any of those airplanes, Shane?
Yeah, far too many of them.
I want to know what was your scariest experience with an airplane now, but maybe let's gloss over that for now.
Yeah. And I found that the work of identifying the needs, communicating the needs, collaborating, I was able to work in cross-functional collaborative teams before it was a thing called Agile. It was just, this is the way that we worked. We were working in small teams and small organizations, working for clients that were also fairly small. So a lot of access directly to the people who were using our product. Moved back home to New Zealand and picked that up, carried on. They called me General Manager of Applications Development and International Operations for one organization, which meant that I spent a lot of time traveling around the world trying to understand customer needs. And I had a team of people who were building the product back in New Zealand and deploying and installing those. Came to SoftEd in the early 2000s. That's when I learned about Agile. And in the early 2000s, of course, the bleeding edge topic at that stage was, what is this Agile stuff? So I got to spend time with people like Jim Highsmith, Alistair Coburn, Ken Beck, Ken McDonald, Tom and Mary Poppendieck, and Ellen Gottesdiener, Johanna Roth, and my bookshelf has got many signed copies, and was able to then start working again with teams to apply these ideas. I found that some of the message of agility was getting lost because of, as you say, who comes up with these ideas? How do we get the stuff to the team? And if we look at Scrum, it's a framework that's deliberately lightweight. And it talks about you need a product backlog, you need a sprint backlog. The product owner is magically able to produce the product backlog And there's an expectation, not actually from the authors of the Scrum Guide, but there's become an expectation in the world that the product owner is this all-powerful individual who knows everything about the product, understands the technology, brings the ideas, understands the customer needs, understands the environment of the end consumer and user of the product, knows the corporate stakeholder environment, and can make great priority decisions while writing every single user story with its acceptance criteria. It just doesn't work. I felt also that there was a big gap in the communication around what is happening with analysis. So I had people say, we're agile. We don't do analysis anymore. We don't have analysts because we're agile. Scott Ambler tackled that one by saying analysis is so important, we do it all the time, and bring that into the team. But I'm going to say that in my experience, some teams do have the skill and competency and interest to do that analysis well. Without somebody who is good at analysis, good at elicitation, good at customer interaction, you're going to build the wrong product. And we see that over and over again. And then not every person who went into programming as a career, one wants to do that stuff and is good at it. Whereas the people who have chosen that analysis discipline, they've self-selected and they probably do have the emotional competencies and the curiosity and the people skills needed to really understand and elicit those requirements. I got involved with the IIBA, the International Institute for Business Analysis, and with the Agile Alliance at around about the same time. And under the auspices of the Agile Alliance, was one of the team that worked with Ellen Gottesdiener and was one of the people on the team, actually. That's where I had the opportunity to spend quite a long time really understanding her perspective and getting her ideas. And Ellen is absolutely one of the pioneers in this space. And we produced the Agile extension to the Business Analysis Body of Knowledge, which is a joint IIBA and Agile Alliance publication. Later on, we produced a second version of that. This is where I met Ryland and Steve, my co-authors. Although Steve and I had met already when we met Ryland. And with version 2 of the Agile extension to the BABOK, I feel we've got something that's really solid in terms of how these ideas play out. But one of the things that when we were working, there were 6-7 people working on the Agile extension. And there was frequently topics that would come up and we would have a really good discussion. And then we'd have to say, that's not part of the BABOK. And it became almost a joke that that's a topic for your next book. And we would tease each other that, yeah, don't go down this rat hole here. There's enough. This is what we need in the BABOK. You need to, if you want to, take it deeper. Here's a topic for your next book. Afterwards, Steve and myself were sitting down and over a glass of wine somewhere, and we're talking about there are these ideas that we want to get out. And we'd pondered writing a book. I had written the No Projects book with Evan Laybourne that seemed to get reasonably successful. A lot of good feedback about that. Steve had written way back in the late 1990s, early 2000s, the patterns for effective use cases. So we both had written books, and we thought, yeah, why not? We know it's painful, but let's do it again. And we came up with something with some early draft stuff, and we were looking for who do we know that could be a good reviewer and give us good feedback. And we sent a couple of chapters to Ryland, and he came back with fantastic feedback. Ryland is the deepest practitioner of the three of us. He's the one who's putting these ideas really firmly in play in the teams that he's most closely working with. Whereas Steve brings the academic perspective. Steve is a PhD. and has got all of that research basis. I bring, what do I bring? Experience working across many different teams, but not as deep as Ryland is currently working. So the 3 ended up being, we felt, really complementary. And the feedback Ryland had given us was so valuable that we asked him, do you want to be a co-author? And we then rewrote the thing at least twice more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you haven't written a book, it is a labor of love that takes far longer than you expect, and you're going to rewrite it at least 4 times.
You're at my shopping list at least 3 times, Shane, so I dread to think what it's going to be like if I ever get around to writing a book. Just to take a glance back at this and see if I can... I want to summarize it from a slightly different perspective, because I was talking to Dan North. Mm-hmm. When was that? A month ago or so. My conversations with Dan were very interesting because he gave a talk about Scrum and other antiquity. Was the name of the talk. But way back when, I remember at university I was asked to look at it, and when I did my dissertation, had to build a software product. I bought the very first edition of test-driven development when it first came out and used TDD to build my product. And that was a brilliant experience for me. But then I've been reflecting back on it and thinking about Dan's conversation. And the Agile was created at a time when the competitive landscape for technology firms and software product firms was very different to what it is today. There have been some amazing technical enablers. We had a gentleman called Dave Bowie, CEO of Slides, on the episode a couple of weeks ago. And he was saying that some of his challenges when it comes to scaling, none of them are around technology anymore. Yeah. If they need more horsepower, if they need more space, if they need more servers, if that just happens. But when the Agile Manifesto was written, that wasn't the case. Getting products to market was a hell of a lot harder than it is nowadays from a technical perspective. And so the world has moved on because the technology landscape has moved on. Products have been able to get more complex. As a consequence, humans have made more complex organizations to deal with these more complex products. And Agile, at its essence, never changed. And I'm not saying that anything there was wrong, but what I find interesting is that the world around Agile changed. And then the one thing that kind of then seemed to get consistently misinterpreted was the role of analysis. And how do you understand what the user and customers want? How do you articulate that in such a way, with or without the teams, so that they can take something and actually stand a good chance of getting it right first time? And then how does it get verified? And then how do you know that it's actually as valuable as you thought it should be? And actually what seems to have happened is that analysis wasn't, first of all, it was pulled out of the teams and put into a separate function. And then it just seemed to evaporate as a whole function. And what we seem to have is lots of organizations claiming to be agile and trying to be agile without having any form of analysis skills. And then the product world comes along with some great analysis skills and some really good tools and some really good techniques and actually wants to get this stuff ready. And then they almost get lambasted and attacked for doing upfront analysis away from the agile teams. And one of the things I think you said, which kind of hits the nail on the head, and it's only a little part of what you said, but sometimes teams just don't have the inclination or the bloody desire to actually do that analysis work with the users. They just don't want to do it. And so then we find ourselves in a situation where we've destroyed analysis as a function or as a skill, as a career almost. And we've got development teams who are trying to do their best with some maybe overzealous agilists pushing to have the teams own it all. And product people say, well, hold on, there is some stuff that needs to be done up front. And then them getting attacked by the agile people. So then there's this ridiculous product and agile battle. And what I found then interesting, well, from 2 perspectives, when I was able to, thankfully, I feel very lucky to have had the opportunity to have read your book, was that one, you were talking about something which actually I've been espousing for a good 4 or 5 years now, which kind of lands with all of my clients, which is about effectively using Kanban lean principles for your backlog. Secondly, you were really acknowledging the fact that there are skill sets which historically we haven't had enough focus on, which have really hindered the ability of agile teams to be credible. And I think that's where I think your book is very interesting. So your book, The Rock Crusher, I can see it in the background there. For those of you watching on YouTube, again, you can also see that book there. It has got some awesome stuff in there and some other things which I'd like to dig into a little bit. But I think the question which many people are answering, apart from how does it solve that problem you articulated at the beginning, Ben, is what the hell is a rock crusher? Because honestly, Shane, it's a good title for a book, but it could be a book about anything.
It could be. Hence the subtitle.
I was trying to imagine that. Could it be a Philip Pullman book? Could it be like it could be a Joe Nesbo book. It could be a Harry Hole thriller. But no, I'm pulling your leg.
All three of us came up with the metaphor of the rock crusher. In my case, I had actually done work in diamond mines in South Africa, in the kimberlite mines. So in the
you weren't in that film with Leonardo DiCaprio, were you?
No.
Oh, okay, good.
So in the kimberlite diamond mines, they're ancient volcanic pipes. So they blast out big chunks of rock, literally 2 tons and more. They blast them out of the ground, and they put them through a series of mills where they crush them, and they do physically break them apart and separate the gems from the overburden, from the extra rock, and they discard 99.99% of stuff. And what comes out of those gems? So for me, that was the source of the metaphor. If I think about requirements in organizations or expressed needs in product, there's a huge amount of stuff that people ask for. But what they really need, and when we get down to what is truly valuable, it's going to be the small pieces. One of the surveys, the Standish Group study, talks about the proportion of features in a software product that aren't used. And they're somewhere around 60 to 70% of features in a typical software product are never used. And I think our process for eliciting and communicating requirements is a big part that causes that. We go to our stakeholders, we go to these people and say, hey, tell me what you think you need. And there's history as well that says, tell me what you think you need, and we'll deliver it at some point in the future, probably in 6 months to a year's time. So what I'm really saying is, tell me what you think you might possibly need in a year's time from now. And by the way, if you get it wrong, it's your fault, not mine. So we get this laundry list of, give me this and this, hoping that somewhere in there is the one thing that this person will actually need when the future comes around. And we see bloated products everywhere.
And I think, Jai, some of it's down to, I think, in some organizations, the length of what I call the promise cycle. You get annual promise cycles, and you make a promise at the beginning, and then you're buggered if you don't deliver it by the end. And I think you're right. It's very, that point you made, you're asking someone to tell you what they want in 1 year's time. And so are you then saying if 99.9% of the rocks that are being crushed in the diamond mine were crap which just got thrown away? I guess it's, as a proportion of a backlog, it's not too dissimilar when you look at all of the ideas that are coming in from all the different avenues.
Yeah. And one of the big anti-patterns that I've certainly seen is the backlog is where ideas go to die. I worked with one organization. They had over 1,000 items in this one team's backlog. More than 100, actually, it was close to 200 of them, had been on that list for 7 years. These were things that were still valuable, quote unquote, that one day we will get to build this thing that was requested 7 years ago. The person who requested it is no longer in the organization. The business department that wanted it doesn't exist anymore, but it's still on the backlog. And every time that team looks at that backlog, just the cognitive load of trying to think about 1,000 items. So reducing that, changing that backlog from a reservoir to a flow is one of the key messages of the book. And then turning it from a thin pipe to a funnel. And the concept of the rock crusher is we get ideas in, and they will come in like rocks in a mine. Some of them will be large and chunky, some will be small. The proportion of value in there will differ. And they're going to come in various time horizons. And we want to break them up. If it's not going to be worth it, if this thing doesn't have a gem inside it, throw it away very quickly. Get it out of that backlog. The term we've used in the book is the wastegate. The wastegate is the single, if you implement nothing else from that book, implement the wastegate. Throw away the ideas that are not going to be valuable and be ruthless about them. Don't let your backlog become a reservoir. But then the metaphor again is it's a funnel that's coming down, and then we have a thin pipe at the bottom. The thin pipe are the ready rocks that are going into the team, and those are the things that, yeah, we know there's value here. We have validated that value in order to get here, and now let's get that out, deliver it. So these would be the stories that will go into a sprint if you're using Scrum. That'll be the next story off the top of the Kanban board.
Okay. So let me replay this if I got it right. You've got the big rocks that are coming in. They are big, hefty, chunky things, 2-tonners. You're implementing a wastegate to say that is there probability that this is going to be something of value once it's delivered. And then as that's getting broken down, the waste is discarded straight away, does not languish on the backlog, just moved off. And then what you're left with is stuff where there's a higher probability of them being valuable once they're in the customer's hands, something they're willing to change their behavior in order to adopt and use in their daily or weekly, monthly lives. So then if we go back to this wastegate, and I'll say, I refer to it as your book rather than the model or anything else, because then it will just incite all kinds of conversations and went down a few rabbit holes. But in your book, you talk about who or what skills are necessary to make a wastegate work. So how does this, if we're going to solve that problem, and it's all well and good us saying, great, you break them down when the crap goes off, but what kind of skills and what type of people are needed to make that wastegate functionally effective?
So we've looked at what are the hats that need to be worn, the roles that need to be there to do really effective elicitation, communication, and make those decisions. We do now, there has to be somebody who is empowered to make the yes or no decision, the absolute prioritization. Who will do this next piece of work? In Scrum, they talk about the the product owner. We split that role into two different perspectives. There is the backlog owner. This is the person who is fully empowered to make the decision. We will do this before that at the thin pipe level. This is the next most important thing for this team to work on. Then we have the solution owner. Now, in the ideal Scrum environment, all of these roles I'm describing will be embodied in that single product owner, the person who is empowered, who understands the needs from the buying organization. If we distinguish between the customer and the end consumer user of products, because normally there is somebody who's paying for the thing to be built, and there is somebody who is using the product to do some piece of work with. Very especially when you're building software products that are used inside organizations. If you are building products that you're selling, yes, you've got that end consumer as well, but often there is still a payer as somebody else who will be paying, who we would often call that person in our model, we call them the solution owner. This is the person who cares about how this thing is going to impact my part of the organization. One of the challenges we frequently see is that a team is not just responsible for a single product or a single value stream. In many organizations, teams will be tasked with working on bits of different products. Therefore, you have different business-focused stakeholders who have different needs. And then you get into the priority conversation about do this piece for that product or do this piece for that product first, and the two solution owners will be in conflict. That is part of the reason why we say we have this backlog owner who does make that priority decision. They can get past the he who shouts loudation discussion to see truly what is going to be the most valuable. But they typically can't do this on their own. We call out the skill set of analysis as a very important skill set. The skill set of understanding customer needs, whether that's user experience, customer experience. Now, will the analyst have CX experience or UX experience? Might have. So these are all hats that need to be worn, the number of bodies that they embody, that depends on the size, scale, and structure of your organization. But what we're calling out is these skill sets need to be there. Without them, there will be a gap in the organization and a gap in the product. So understanding that customer needs, understanding the wider group of stakeholders, understanding things like environmental needs. Today, understanding the impact of the products that we have on the use of electricity. Now, I'm sorry, most product owners have got no idea about that. Most technologists have got no idea. But we need somebody on the expertise, on the team or available to the team with the expertise to say, hey, if we took this approach, we will have a lighter carbon footprint than that. Does that matter today? Yes, it matters. We need somebody who can say, from an accessibility perspective, here is how this thing should be designed. And looking at the diversity of our user community, of the people whose lives we hope to impact with our product. So we need to have those many different perspectives. So we talk about it. It takes a village to own a product. And that village has multiple different roles, multiple different perspectives. They are hats that will be worn, roles that people will step into. They are not necessarily job titles.
It reminds me, I think this was Ken Blanchard who said, no one person is as good as all of us.
Yeah.
And I think there's a whole heap of truth in there. And what you're saying, I think, is true at various different scales. But what I'm also picking up, I think, that is that if the types of challenges which you're articulating, which resonate with me from my time working in kind of big organizations and from some of the bigger clients that I have now, is that a multiple stakeholder, that situation where you have a backlog which is traversing potentially many different business lines. So if you create this cross-business line prioritization dependency, isn't something that's easily solved. Now, if you're a smaller product organization, you will have competing demands, but not on the same level of, what's the word I'm looking for? Annoyance, frustration, scale, noise, ego-driven, I'm not backing down because this was my pet idea type situations. And it does take very specific skill sets to deal with that. So if you're saying that, and this is where maybe I'm a little bit hazy, is that you've got your backlog owner who is looking after the ordering the backlog as it's going down the thin pipes, as it's going down towards the teams. And you've got your solution owner. Let's say, the skills of that solution owner in a traditional organization, what type of role would they be housed in? Just so I can try and kind of make sense.
They're going to be most often, in larger organizations, going to be the nominated person from the business department who is there to look after our needs. So where you have multiple business areas, multiple business departments working on who are going to be using a single product, there will be different departmental representatives. And you sometimes will see this formed as a steering committee in larger organizations within their product development. Now, if you are the Goldilocks Agile project, small cross-functional team, customer on the team, building a single product, reasonably straightforward technology stack, then pretty much all of those roles probably can fit into a single head. Those problems were solved quite a while ago. Honestly, there are quite a few organizations who don't need our book. They are doing this really well. We're writing this for the people who are struggling, who we see, and a lot of that is in the large organizations who have this conflicting needs, where politics does come into play, where the development teams often feel like they're at the end of a very confused pathway.
And historically, I suppose this is where the product owner role was supposed to solve it. Let's say if we look at it from a Scrum perspective, or if you're in a product organization of a certain size, you have a product manager who would maybe be wearing a lot of his hats and helping out, because not everyone uses Scrum. Has Scrum had its day? That's a conversation for another time, perhaps. And now I've got that clear event. So we're looking at the solution owner as being someone who maybe traditionally is representing a group within the business or entire business line, the kind of person that's going to turn to a steerco and help steer the whole product. So we're in a situation here where one backlog, many needs.
Yeah.
And then the solution owner is the person who is able to say at that big, at the waste gate, on that higher level, okay, this is valuable, this isn't valuable. But then I suppose if they're looking after their needs, is it only their needs that's then going to the team, or are they working with other solution owners to...
And this is where the village and the backlog owner, so there has to be somebody who is empowered to say, yeah, now there's a thing for this stream of work, there's a thing for this stream of work. They're both valuable. Which one is more valuable? I have to be empowered in that backlog owner role. Say, yes, we'll do that one first and that one next. And here is why. And my decision is fine.
So the solution owners are putting in some of the legwork to help articulate it, talk about the value, create the hypotheses, and then there's the backlog owner who is having the final say as to what is the order of things as they flow through. Okay. In this instance, it's keeping this kind of imaginary world, this Fortland kind of thing we're creating for people. Who owns the vision for the product overall in this example?
Overall, that my ideal situation is that backlog owner really does know. So they've got a lot of the product management perspective. They really do have the big picture, and they have. But they don't need to, for instance, know the detailed product architecture. But they do need to be able to have those large and hard conversations about value for the organization and our clients. Mm-hmm. So that backlog owner, that gives them the ability to make those hard priority decisions.
I asked a vision question, one, because I've had this real up and down love-hate relationship with product visions, and it's turned back to love since I started getting to know, I mentioned actually before we started recording, called Radhika Dutt, and actually her mentorship when it came to the vision for the product that me and my partner are building. Business partner, not life partner. My wife didn't want to be involved in it. She said, hard no, don't want to work with you, hard enough living with you. That actually, but what it helped me realize, as well as the ridiculous post I put on LinkedIn, which just went bananas with a number of comments and view and impressions, which was around, does anyone still use Moscow prioritization? And it all blew up. But what it made me realize was actually having a vision where you can really focus in on a single person to whom you're making a difference. And maybe there are various people whose needs to be met along the way to achieve that ultimate vision, really does allow you to prioritize. And without that, it diddled. And I think this is part of the issue then with a backlog owner or a product owner, is that when you don't have that vision, you don't have any option to say, you're not going to get this before that person, because actually if that person goes first, that gets us closer to the end goal quicker. And I don't think that's something which is often achievable in environments like of which we're painting this kind of this Fortland experiment.
Yeah, that's the empowered backlog owner who truly does carry the vision.
Yeah, and that makes life a lot easier. Now, what I was curious about, and maybe you've answered this earlier, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. Like, I've always been a very keen advocate of having the analysis skills within the team, and you were describing this village. There's many people, many skills, many hats required to get the work, to create something that's valuable. As an ex-business analyst, then I really enjoyed being on a team, and I found that my skills are very useful. And I can think of many business analyst skill sets holding people who were phenomenally impactful in a team. Agile or not, they were just like different level effective, and they built strong relationships with the team, members, stakeholders. They did a fantastic job. And what I noticed in your book is that the analyst as a skill set isn't then within the team. Now, is that because of what you said earlier? Or I say the development team. Is that because of what you said earlier, that not all teams want to do it, or was there another reason?
If that's the message you're getting from the book, I think we've made a mistake. We see that analysis professional as part of the team. We call the rollout as also doing what we talk about as the boundary spanner. They are bringing different perspectives together, being a bridge, not a ferry, is one of the ways we describe the role. If we think traditionally what we used to do as business analysts, you would go and spend a month or longer, and you produce a a requirements document, a thing of beauty, 200 pages that you put your heart and soul into. You've used a template. It's got all of the functional and non-functional requirements, it's got all the data structures, it's got the shell statements, it's got process flows. It's a thing that you really have put a huge amount of effort into. And we would take it down to the edge of a river, and we'd put it on a ferry, and we'd put 2 gold coins on its eyes or on the cover, and we'd push it out and hope that somebody at the other side would pick it up and do something with it. And typically what happened at the other side, it would arrive at a development team, they would pick it up, look at the cover, and put it on the shelf, and then go and build whatever the hell they felt like building.
What we should have done, Shane, was actually put a match to it, like a Viking longboat, and just sent it out and burnt it.
Yeah, and the sad thing is, the knowledge that went into producing that artifact was so important. And then we ended up redoing all of the work because it came out in conversations afterwards. Becoming a bridge is still having that knowledge, but now I bring the right people together. So if we're working on this piece of the product, we've got a set of backlog items, we've got some rocks that are now ready to have some work done on them, whether it's validating them or whether it is crushing it up and getting it to the ready state. As the analyst, in the bridge, I'm bringing the right people together and facilitating the conversations versus trying to go there, gather these requirements, write them down and carry them across. No, I'm bringing the people together to have those conversations in a just enough, just in time basis, with the level of granularity that is appropriate to where this rock is in the funnel. If it's close to coming out the thin pipe, that level of granularity, the user story and the acceptance criteria. But if it's higher up in the pipe, we're making some decisions about should this thing move down or not? Should we take this to the next step? We need to have other ways of learning. We talk in the book about what is a well-formed rock. A rock at any size has to have an intent. A why is this thing useful? It has to have a verifiable model that will allow us to verify that intent. And we do that by specifying and executing a test against that verifiable model. Now, if the granularity of this rock is the user story that's dropping out of the bottom of the pipe, the verifiable model is the acceptance criteria, and the test is build the code and run the test. Ideally, test-driven development, Gherkin statements, whatever, that piece works as planned.
Mm-hmm.
And those tests are valuable artifacts for the product going forward in good, solid, test-driven development approach. That's also the most expensive way of verifying and testing. So we want to do that on things that we have a high level of confidence in. To get to that level of confidence, we might have to do some work earlier in the pipeline. If the rock, now maybe it's the size of an epic. This is a new feature we're going to add to the product. Our intent is to engage clients with a particular approach. We're going to do something new for them. Our verifiable model then becomes the hypothesis. If we deliver this, we will get this behavior from our clients. How will I know we will get this behavior? One way I could do it is build a paper prototype and show it to 10 potential clients. If 8 or more of those clients say, yes, this will improve my workflow, then we will add it to the backlog. It will drop down and we will then make decisions about when are we going to implement this. If less than 8 of them say this will improve my workflow or give us the behavior we want, then we're going to throw that out through the wastegate and we'll come up with a different hypothesis.
So you say some of that discovery and assessment work is present on the backlog rather than it being something which mystically maybe never happens or does happen before it hits the backlog. What you're espousing here is that discovery, that assessment work when the ideas are coming in is presented on the backlog. And this is what, so are you saying that in a way you have almost ultimately some form of analysis backlog item, which I think is a little bit controversial for some people perhaps.
Yeah, because otherwise, if we don't make that work visible, somebody's going to have to go and do it on the side. Because honestly, without validating that, if we show it to 10 potential users and 7 of them say this is stupid, I have just saved a whole chunk of time and money building the wrong thing. On the other hand, if all 10 of them say, yes, if this was in the product, I would use it, it will make a difference, then I've also got a very clear conversation about priority.
It reminds me of, is it Alberto Salvoya, the right it XYZ hypotheses? Great ways to test those ideas, put numbers around it, get something in front of people, get them using it, get them getting their skin in the game that actually is going to be something useful to them.
Absolutely. And by bringing it out and making it visible as this is a piece of work that has to be done. And the other thing about that is when we're looking at capacity planning, we're saying these are pieces of work that have to be done that will not necessarily deliver the next piece of working software for the sprint. But if we don't do it, we're not going to learn, but there has to be capacity to do it. Is one of the things that I think that this focus in Scrum on the development team that's got lost. And the Scrum Guide now says the team. They don't just say the development team, because originally it was developers, and there was the emphasis became the people who write the code. The intent was never that it was a cross-functional team, but the message that got conveyed was the only work that is valuable is writing code. Testing and analysis got lost in that. Mm-hmm. By pulling that analysis work and making it very clear and visible, this is work that has to be done. There is a capacity that will be taken out of other stuff to do this, and we can prioritize.
Shane, you're preaching to the converted. I've enjoyed the conversation. I think we've covered a lot of ground in our, we've been going for a little while now. So I think maybe it's time that we draw this conversation to an end. And I'm just taking down at my notes. I was going to try and do some form of recap, but I'm not sure how well this is going to work, because what am I taking away from it? I think that 99.9% of the ideas that we come across are probably going to be crap, and that we should find ways to not get them on the backlog forever. Maybe have a place on there temporarily, or maybe there's some other kind of filtration mechanism at the front. But actually, one of the things saying in the Rock Crusher book is that we have that wastegate and we throw away the stuff which we just figure isn't going to be useful. You have a solution owner is really helping to make sure that the value and understanding about the competing solutions for their solution, for their part of the business, is understood, with the backlog owner being the person that really owns the vision and the prioritization call as to how those rocks are ordered as they go into, say, the fin pipe, the pipe that leads down to the teams. We spoke about perhaps one of the more controversial things here, about having analysis backlog items, which I would love to spend more time talking about, but I'm not going to have time today. But it does go into some great detail in your book, so people can buy the book and find out more about that. And what else, Shane? If there was one takeaway that you think you'd love people to be taking away with them, funnily enough, from this episode, what would it be, Shane?
If you haven't got a good gate process, then you've got a backlog that is full of stagnant items that are actually just taking cognitive load. And if you've got something that's been on your backlog more than 6 months, please question, will we ever get this thing?
Sage words. Shane, the book is out now?
It is. Available on Amazon. Published with the IIBA, so you can also go to the IIBA, but that will point you to Amazon. And search for the Rock Crusher book. And we have a website, rockcrusher.org. If you go to rockcrusher.com, it is a place that crushes rocks. They sell machinery.
What a coincidence. So the rockcrusher.org? I think if anyone's had problems like we spoke about at the top, where you just can't get backlog items ready, or you just can't get work ready, and there's a high defect rate for stuff coming out from teams because they just didn't understand what on earth they were supposed to be doing. And when you're looking around, you're thinking, damn, we haven't really got much analysis skill set available to the team, or we haven't got someone that can really understand the solution, and we haven't got anyone that really makes his final calls. But I would recommend the Rock Crusher as a great resource for perhaps giving you some inspiration as to what some of the answers could be. Sadly, we didn't get much time to talk about the flow element of it, but again, I think that what comes through loud and clear in the book is you do see your backlog as something where work should be flowing through rather than clunking through and getting very old and mouldy over time. So Shane, thank you so much for your time this day. Obviously, we're in very different time zones, so I'll just say this day. People want to find out more about you, they can hit you up on LinkedIn. I assume is the best place?
Absolutely, yep.
Brilliant. Now, Shane, in the next episode, because you're going to hang around, we're going to record another one after this. I know that there was something we had on the table for quite some time, which was to talk about coaching. Agile coaching, professional coaching, maybe even product coaching, product leadership coaching, because I think there's a deep vein of contradiction in some people's minds that comes through with some of this. I'm really keen to have that conversation with you if you're up for it.
I would love to.
Brilliant. We'll end this one here. Do tune in next week for that conversation on coaching. Just what the hell is it? Honestly, I think that's what some people really want to know. What the hell is agile coaching? What's product coaching? What the hell is professional coaching? Why isn't it like a football coach? All questions that we will answer next week. Thank you everyone for listening.